All right, welcome back to the PCC podcast. I'm your host, Marissa Roy, and today in this episode, we are going to be touching on why stress makes you fat. Stress has become like the enemy in the past 5 years or so. It's just been completely demonized. Everybody hates stress, we're avoiding stress, and I want to provide you today with not only some solutions for living a stressful life, but some perspective shifts because I think it's important to keep in mind. So when it comes to stress, right, ultimately one thing I want you to remember is that it's never going away. You will always have stress and stressors in your life. If you're in a time right now where there is no stress in your life, be grateful, right? Because that is not normal. And stress is highly subjective. So we're going to talk about exactly how that can affect how stress impacts your body composition and your body fat. So we're going to talk about a lot, but to start, let's talk about this stress and fat loss situation. So you might have heard that stress makes it harder for you to lose fat. Maybe it makes it easier for you to gain belly fat, visceral fat. Is this true? And the reality is that yes, high stress environments and being highly stressed for a long period of time can absolutely impact your ability to lose weight if you're on that sort of a journey. Now, there's a lot of reasons, and what I don't want you to do is adopt the mindset that it's just, if I have a lot of stress in my life, that I'm just helpless and I can't lose weight, because that is a narrative that a lot of people who are selling gimmicky supplements or don't actually have your best interest in mind want to profit off of you because they want you to feel like a victim and like you aren't already the solution to your own problems, and you are. So let's talk about that. So first, we have to define stress. So stress is just any situation, circumstance, or thing that we perceive to be stressful. That's not the official definition. I should probably have looked it up, but it's just a stressor is a thing that can cause and inflict stress upon someone. Stress is, I'm just going to look it up. Stress definition is pressure or tension exerted on a material object, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances, subject to pressure or tension, right? So there's pressure, there's tension, there is a circumstance here. Now, stress can be defined in one of two ways in this context. So it can either be an acute stressor, so meaning a short-term stressor, something that doesn't last very long, and very long depends. It could be 2 minutes, it could be an hour, it could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. But relative to whatever we're comparing it to, it's short, it's acute. Chronic stress is stress that lasts for an extended period of time, and this is the stress we really want to be aware of and want to work towards mitigating as much as possible. So acute stress is actually usually a great thing. So acute short-lived stressors sometimes are even higher in magnitude, right? Like going through a really tough workout, probably not something you considered as stress, but that is stress on your body. Going through a really tough workout for 15, 20 minutes is a stress on the body, but it produces a beneficial response. Your body says, you know what? I'm going to adapt to this. I'm going to come back better so that I don't have to deal with this being as painful next time, right? So to acute stressors, we adapt, and this is a good thing. It is a bodily response that we have that allows us to survive in this world, right? Maybe a really tough work deadline or something you didn't think was possible in a short term, like maybe you got to sign something on Monday, it needs to be done by Friday, and it's the biggest project you've ever done, but you accomplish it and you put your head down, you get to work and you do it. This is an acute stressor, right? It didn't last forever. You knew there was an end date, and you came out better from it. Maybe you finished and you said, wow, I didn't know I was capable of that. I could totally do that again. I could do that next time. Next time it'll be easier because I know what's coming. And that is the nature of an acute stressor. A chronic stressor is something that essentially we don't really know what the end date is. It's maybe a toxic work environment, a unhealthy relationship. Maybe it's a season of your life that you're really just not sure what comes to, when it comes to an end. Or maybe it's having a long-term illness, like for example, having Lyme disease or an autoimmune disease is a chronic stressor on the body because it's not something you really get rid of, right? Just sustained malnutrition, not eating appropriately, can be a chronic stressor on the body. Sleep deprivation over a long period of time can be a chronic stressor, right? One bad night of sleep is acute. It's not going to have that big of an impact. But 20 nights in a row, 20 months in a row of bad sleep, yeah, that's going to have an effect, right? So those are the differences between acute and chronic. We're going to want to keep that in mind. And then we're also going to want to keep in mind the fact that stress perception can drastically impact the response that our body and physiology has to it. So you've probably heard before, the same two people could get cut off on the highway and have two completely different reactions, right? One person could absolutely just lose it, be shouting, be yelling, be frustrated with this person and be angry. And another person could be like, oh, well, I guess they had to get somewhere, kind of laugh it off and not even think it's a big deal. That is, two people having a different perception of the same situation, the same stressor. Two people could be met with the same deadline and they could respond two completely different ways. One person could procrastinate, stress out, have anxiety, and sabotage the project. And another person could be proactive, take it as a challenge, look at it from a really productive lens and say, how can I get better from this? How can I make this the best experience possible, right? So your perception of stress drastically plays into how things play out for you. And so if you are just looking at things from the lens of, everything is stressful, everything is bad, this makes my life worse, I encourage you to look for the areas where you can grow in that and looking at stress as something that is a challenge. Stress is something that makes you better. It makes you more resilient. And that is a really hard mental frame to grasp and to really hold on to. But I promise you, if you do it and you really buy into that for yourself, the way you approach situations can drastically change, and that will give you more control over your situation. So stress can be good or bad. We can look at it from two different lenses. And the last thing about stress is that you want to know is that our capacity for it increases over time. It's not just, okay, we have this certain threshold, this limit where, we crash if there's too much stress. Like, no, we can adapt consistently. This is how training in the gym works, right? We train, we push ourselves to a certain degree, and we get stronger. So the next time we can go harder, we can add more weight, more reps, and we do that over and over and over again. That is our body's stress tolerance to weight training, adapting. And stress mentally and stress behaviorally works exactly the same way. So when you handle a stressor, the next time that same thing comes at you, you're no longer going to be as surprised. You're going to be adapted to that stressor. So this can make it easier for us to not be as overwhelmed when we have been in a situation for a while. We know how to handle it, and this can be very empowering. So our capacity can increase for stress, and I like to think of it as a sink and drain analogy. The sink that you have might be the same size, but your ability to drain water out of that sink might get better and better over time. How you manage stress is that drain. And the inflow of water might be really rapid, but if you're able to manage stress better, then the capacity of your sink has increased, right? You're just gonna be able to funnel through water more versus the sink overflowing. So what might have previously made you overflow might be something you're able to drain out as you adapt to stress over time. So when can stress make you gain weight? So number one reason would be high perceived stress. So you perceive that something is very stressful and it creates a physiological response in your body. So if you are, for example, I don't want to say being chased by a bear, because who wouldn't be scared in that situation? Let's say if you're being held to a really rigid, strict deadline and you have been in a work environment for 10 years where you've literally never had any strict deadlines. You might be highly stressed from this because it's new and it's something you're not habituated to. But a second person might have the same deadline, but they come from a super high caliber, fast deadline, high pace type of place, and they might have a completely different response. They might say, this again, okay, cool, I'll knock it out. whereas the first person might be really, really stressed. And so the first person is going to experience a really big spike in the hormone cortisol. Cortisol, you might have heard of, is our stress hormone. And this is something that is, cortisol spikes all throughout the day for a lot of different reasons. It's even just the hormone that wakes us up at the beginning of the day, and it's not a bad thing. Cortisol spikes by nature are not a bad thing, but when they are spiked out of proportion and for an extended, prolonged period of time, that is where we can run into trouble. So if you have a chronic stress, right, you don't know the end date, and you are just consistently stressed and stressed and stressed, maybe that's sleep deprivation, maybe that's having these deadlines, being in a horrible work environment. If you're constantly stressed in that way, your cortisol can be chronically elevated, and that can lead to negative outcomes in terms of body fat storage, other hormones, how your body actually functions at the root. And so this is where stress perception and changing that can really benefit you, because you can change the way your body responds just by changing the way you think about a situation. But at the same time, there is an inherent effect that stressors will have on you, even if your perception of them is relatively modest. For example, I don't see myself as a stressed person, me, Marissa, right? I have a lot going on every single day. I probably work 10 or 12 hours a day, but I don't feel stressed. I don't typically have a lot of stress in my life. However, my environment and the way that I live my life is a high stress environment. So even though I don't feel stressed, there is still some impact of stress on my body, but because I'm managing it well, it's less. Now, if I were running around like a chicken with my head cut off all the time, I would probably have more visceral fat. I would probably have less of the results that I want in my life in all areas, if that makes sense. So that perceived stress and how we look at the situations with the stress that is present can definitely impact how much we do have that high cortisol, which can lead to body fat gain and just a dysregulation of your hormones and how your body functions. So that can slowly erode over time how your body works. Like, for example, raising insulin resistance as a result of chronically elevated cortisol. So you might process carbs a little worse over time and have more trouble using carbs as energy rather than storing them as fat if you are consistently stressed and stressed and stressed, right? So it's not like I had one stressful day, my metabolism's screwed. It's a prolonged thing. Now, the biggest thing that I think impacts your weight and your ability to lose weight with stress is not the physiological, uncontrollable thing. It is actually our response to stress. When we are stressed, what do? We deprioritize our boundaries. We deprioritize ourselves and our goals. We live on an irregular schedule. Maybe we're sleep deprived, or we don't fuel ourselves with proper nutrition. Or maybe we stress eat, or emotional eat, or stress not eat, right? And these responses to stress are really what I think gets us out of whack. And a lot of times we don't even realize it's happening because we're so stressed that we're not being mindful. Life is just flying by us like a blur, and we're just eating and we don't even realize it because it's a coping mechanism that's so automatic. This is where I think the majority of weight gain from stress lies for most people. I won't say all, but most or many people is from this. And so what you can do is start to develop an awareness of your emotional response of stress. How do you perceive the stress? And then what thoughts does that bring to mind? And what emotions do those thoughts trigger? And then what actions do you take as a result of those emotions? And a lot of times we take really unproductive actions when we have strong emotions. And a lot of times that is overextending ourselves, people pleasing, just staying up late to help others, just not prioritizing ourselves or our boundaries whatsoever because more needs to get done and we're really stressed and we're letting our mind race before bed, so we're not getting to sleep. And then We're also emotional eating right before bed and just kind of snacking throughout the day because we have these cravings that are ramped up because we are stressed. And so a lot of times taking proper care of your just your nutrition, your sleep schedule, and your boundaries during stressful times can be one of the most impactful things for you to not gain weight. And in fact, for you to make progress and have a stronger sense of control over the stressful situation. I often think that the best time to work on your health and fitness goals is when things are stressful, because then you're going to learn how to actually navigate it through the ups and downs of life rather than just waiting for the calm time where there is no stress, because that doesn't exist. So the behavioral factors of stress, I think, give us a lot more control over the situation, and it's well worth it to focus on that rather than trying to tinker with your hormones and see if you can, make things happen there, because there's just a much larger return on your investment with your time spent with the things that you can actually be aware of and control in real time. And now that's not to say that your hormones and your stress hormones being out of whack is a cop-out. It can be truly a real answer to the problem, but it's just more rare than we think. We want to jump to that. We want to blame something else, but we don't want to blame potentially our habits or our lack of habits for causing where we are today, because that's a tough look in the mirror. But when you are able to do that and you're able to identify that and you feel like this does resonate with you, that's where you can really start taking action and learning how to regulate those difficult emotions, regulate your perceptions to stress, reframe situations, and be really successful in reaching your goals because you have learned those skills. So hopefully this episode was helpful in showing you that stress doesn't have to be the devil. It doesn't have to be the thing that derails you, and you're capable of changing things, turning it around, even if things feel and seem dismal or you're not sure where to turn, where to go. And this can definitely just be one way to enhance your fat loss, your physical results, without even touching a food scale, without even touching any sort of calories, and just understanding how stress impacts you can be your superpower in a busy, career-driven, stressful life. So let me know if you like this episode. Make sure to rate and review the podcast and subscribe if you want more episodes like this. And I will look forward to seeing you in the next one.